helping each other along. I'm really excited for this. So enjoy. Thank you. Hi, so I wanted to introduce you a little bit to just what some quick fashion sketching could look like. I'm not going to make a habit of working at an angle that often. Notice how this end of the sketchbook looks smaller because it's farther away, and this end of the notebook looks wider. That's majorly distorting to what's happening on the page. So most of my demonstrations will be straight up. But in this case, I also think it's important that you have demonstrations where you can see how I move. So to focus on that today, I will work at this angle. And what I'm going to introduce you to is this kind of grid. I'm taking a see-through ruler and creating 1-inch increments up and down the page. And I'm doing this to give me some control over the proportion of my model. And now, I don't think fashion proportion should ever have to mean, that someone's legs are 10 miles long or that their waist is 5 inches. For what I think fashion proportion is about is being able to draw the body as consistently as possible throughout a group. Let's say you're doing a group of junior or plus size or maternity or women's wear, but you're doing a collection of clothes, and within that collection, the more specific and precise you can be about proportion, the more easy it will be to read design decisions that you make. So if you draw 2 jackets, if your consistent proportion is used throughout your sketches, then if you do a drawing that looks, 1 inch longer, it'll be clear that the jacket really is supposed to be 1 inch longer than the other one. But if you don't have a handle on proportion and things are kind of inconsistent, people will never know, oh, did she just draw the shoulders wider there, or is that a puffed, padded shoulder? Now, is that skirt wider than the other skirt, or did it just come out that way because she doesn't draw that consistently? Being able to draw your body very consistently is going to make people really trust every line that you draw, including yourself. So, one thought, first one is, okay, I've drawn this grid. I'm using paper that's 11 by 14. So I've got these 1-inch increments. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is all we need, but I love to have extra space, 10. As a matter of fact, I'm going to leave a margin of free space above, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and a margin of free space below. And I'm going to use these heads to help me heads. I took the inch lines and translated them into little fashion heads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm going to take this 4th head, make a darker line. Now, just because this is long doesn't mean that she has to be tall and skinny. Okay? We still have the option to build her as wide as we want in relation to the proportion, or as narrow, It's not saying that she has to be skinny. These are length proportions. We have a lot of leeway with the width of things. Okay, but for my standard building of the body, 1 inch and 1 head represents 1 head. That same distance, halfway down the second head, will represent shoulder line. Shoulder level, actually representing the top of the shoulder. I sketch in the shoulder as little tennis balls. That's how I think of them. And the bust as well. Oranges, grapefruits, tennis balls, all depends on who you're building those clothes for, either per client or per your own personal taste or vision. But as we know, women come in all shapes and sizes, so there's something for everyone. The bust may be higher or lower on the page. And that's your choice. But throughout any single collection, I suggest that you be consistent with where that bust is. As if the whole collection was designed for one woman, Um, Whereas likewise in a design studio, you will probably have one fit model with one set of measurements who you fit all of your clothes on. And that consistency of fit can become something that your loyal clientele depends on for a certain label. If you work for BB or Chico's or I can't remember her name right now. I was just thinking. But any label you work for is going to be known for having a certain fit. We all know that there's certain designers we go to because we know what size we are in their shop and we know how they fit. The more that you can count on that, the better, because you'll go back as a repeat customer, right? Okay, so I set up the shoulders and the bust, and the bust is like at or below this second line. All right. Third line represents really your natural waist. It's the smallest measurement on the upper body, and it's also well, certainly not for pregnant, but in general, it's the smallest circumference measurement. Doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be pinched in, but if you were to measure around the bust line with the measuring tape, around the waist, around the hip, waist would be the smallest measurement, and then the hip line is the bottom of 4, and that's the widest measurement of the upper body. So check this out. I've broken it down. I'm going to put a center line down the page because we're going to see the body as a symmetrical form. And this lower body block, I create a shape. It's a little bit narrower at the top, a little wider at the bottom if I want to create like an hourglass shape. But you can create the same effects by just using like a brick shape. Because, some women don't have much of a wide hip. Some women do. So that's aesthetics, that's client base. Those are choices for the designer as well. So bust, height or size, hip width, and shoulder width are all things that depend on the customer. And so you come up with your own harmonious shape. So fashion proportion is also an aesthetic choice of your own. But what I will always, always hold you to in my classes is that those measurements should at least correspond to an actual human being or to the mannequin dress form, because having a body that doesn't correspond to anything in real life is truly only for fantasy and not that practical. I'd like us to be as real and as beautiful as possible because I can't imagine anything better than that, right? So, shoulders, bust, and then I have these 2 blocks, and I'm going to mention this to you. So we have a block for the lower body and a block for the upper body. Think of your own body right now. Touch it, right? You have hard as a rock from the bottom of the rib cage up to the shoulder blade. This is all one hard shape. And when you swerve your body, let's say this is the spine, this whole shape moves at once as one shape. It doesn't alter, right? Because all the ribs move in one. They're not independent. Shoulders can move up and down, right? We have a lot of flexibility in our shoulders. But this actual upper body, if you take your upper body and you just lean sideways, you know that everything moves as one. Likewise for the lower body, if you lean sideways and then rest on one foot, and by all means do these things with your own body, that's what happens to these shapes. So the waist, that's why I don't fill in the waist. The waist is this open area. When she goes into action, you're going to see that one side squeezes and one side stretches. And you'll find that's true of your own body. There's like a collapse and a stretch. And that's what makes so much dynamic movement in a fashion pose. And now, that excitement, people generally translate that into being a very tiny waist. But it's not about a tiny waist. It's just about a change of direction. You can have a wide hip block and a wide upper body block, and things are just changing direction when they go into action. But that doesn't mean they have to get super skinny. It's not really about super skinny. It's more about change of direction. And all of this will become more clear as we go over more and more. I'm going to go back to my straight body and just break it down a little bit more. So the first 4 heads are from the crotch or the hip to the top of the head. 4 heads. 1, 2, 3, 4. I love my proportion rules because they're straightforward and super easy to use. Top of head to chin is 1. Shoulder, top of shoulder halfway down. Waist is the 3rd line. Hip is the 4th line. Keeps it clean and simple. For lower body, the leg, 2 heads to knee, 2 heads to ankle. Simple as that. 2 heads to knee, 2 heads to ankle. And just remember that legs don't hang as straight as you think they do. If you even look down at your own legs with feet, hips width apart, you'll notice that from the outside edge of your hip, your legs kind of converge. They come in. Okay, and then when I draw the lower half, I draw from the outside towards the inside as well. So the legs are coming in and then in again. It helps me get the shape. And I want you to notice that I'm drawing with my arm, which is really the reason why I was filming this from a distance, so that you can watch me build the forms of the body with the side of my pencil and how I'm holding my pencil. Because one of the biggest things that I'm going to want to teach you here at the beginning is that there's no such thing really as a line. If you really look around at the world, you don't see lines, you see shapes. And the shapes have edges, and we call those edges, we translate them into lines. But I want every line that you draw throwing some crazy ideas out at you, so if you don't get it yet, that's okay, but kind of showing that if you simply draw empty lines, you're going to be very, very nervous about drawing at all, because every line will have to be perfect, and you'll keep correcting the lines and sometimes just making more and more of a mess. I want to teach you to draw from the inside out, from the core of the body, then building out from a core. Analyzing the body and breaking it into blocks will give you facility in building bodies. But what are bodies? They're silhouettes and they're solid shapes. They're not lines, and I want to teach you to build that from the inside. Okay, when you're working on thighs, you can notice that it's wider at the top, narrower towards the knee. But the knee, exactly like the waist, again, is not a pinched, tiny shape, which, it always seems to be a problem, people pinching that shape and making the knee look like it's a pinched. It's a terrible effect. Knees are pretty big. Take a look at your knees. They're like grapefruits right there, big round spheres. Why do they look dynamic? For the same reason as the waist, because things change direction where the knees are. And that change of direction makes us think that it's a pointy, pinched kind of shape, but that's perception versus reality. Okay. And ankle level is at the 8 line. So she's wearing flats, you could just put her foot right here. Okay, but if she's wearing, big heels, you can stretch that foot down and you get a much taller, quote-unquote, high fashion look. I use diamonds or triangles to simplify the shapes of feet. So what you can see here is a fashion pose that is what we call an action pose and what we call straight static pose. And honestly, we're going to work a lot with action poses. They will enhance your ability to draw, period, and to create all this excitement. And for some people, this is what they love more than anything. But at the same time, I want you to know that a straight figure is all you need to be able to express your designs accurately and clearly. And I have had portfolio students who did excellent portfolios only using straight figures, because I found that some people are just more able to focus on great details when they stop dealing with the figure and focus on the clothes. And fashion, frankly, is about the clothes. And believe me, I'm going to grill you and give you everything, all the means to do a lot of really fun things with poses and figures. But I always want you to know that that's not a requirement for your success. Maybe as an illustrator, no, not as a designer. Okay, so what you have here now is two solid forms that are figures, but hello, but they're they're not lines. They're what I call solid forms. I want you to adjust into finding as if she were made out of clay rather than a pencil line. One thing that I stand firmly behind is this observation that, we learn to write in school, and we write with our fingers, and then we go back to drawing. After they've kind of beaten it out of us, we come back to draw, and we try to draw with our fingers. You can't do much with your fingers. It's very restricted, the range of movement that you can get and the amount of area that you can cover. But when you draw with your arm, you can move quickly. You can get a shape that's fully integrated because you've created the whole shape at once. Right? And just having less control can help you focus more on the whole and not any one single detail for too long. There's just a million reasons why I'm going to encourage you. You see how I'm holding my pencil? I want you to play around with that. I also want you to do an exercise where you practice drawing parallel lines with your arm. You see how I'm doing this with my arm? Practice parallel lines, side of your pencil using your arm. Okay, another exercise I'd like you to do with your arm is sketching circles. The most pure, perfect circle you can, but just as a sketch. Okay, you can do this with spheres as well. These are what I use to create muscle shapes like thighs, biceps, calves. You'll see me do a lot of this. So I'd like you to practice yourself different sizes of circles. And you can do darker ones as well. You're also going to notice that I'm sketching very lightly. And this is something, the only way to train you to do that is to take your eraser away from you. See how there's no eraser on this pencil? The lighter you draw, that means you can make maps of everything and not get specific in your drawings until you've already seen your drawing with a light touch. And then you go in and clarify things with a clean line. A more confident clean line comes later, right?